The reception room inside the old city hall smelled faintly of polished wood, fresh lilies, and the nervous excitement that always hangs in the air right before a wedding ceremony begins. Round tables were draped in ivory linen. Tiny fairy lights had been strung across the high ceiling like captured stars. Soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers. Guests in pastel suits and shimmering dresses leaned toward each other, laughing quietly, clinking champagne flutes that had been poured a little too early. Amara Jenkins stood near the tall arched window, smoothing the lace overlay of her gown for the 10th time in 5 minutes. The dress was not the most expensive one she had tried on, but it was the one that had made her breath catch when she saw herself in the mirror 3 months earlier. Simple A-line silhouette, off-the-shoulder neckline, tiny seed pearls scattered across the bodice like morning dew. She had felt, for once, like someone who belonged in a fairy tale. She caught her own reflection in the glass. Dark eyes, full lips painted soft rose, hair swept into a low chignon with a few tendrils left loose around her face. She looked calm. She looked happy. She was terrified. Not of marrying Carter. She loved him. The loud, bright, slightly careless way he loved life had pulled her out of her shell more times than she could count. But today, every small glance from his family felt like it carried weight. Every smile from his mother seemed to come with an invisible asterisk. Vivian Stone sat at the front table in peach silk, hair sculpted into a perfect silver blonde helmet. She was speaking to her sister with the careful enunciation people use when they know they are being watched. Every so often her gaze flicked toward Amara, not hostile exactly, but cool, appraising, the look you give furniture. You're not sure will match the rest of the room. Amara forced another small smile and turned away from the window. That was when she heard it. Carter's voice, loud enough to carry, casual enough to pretend it was accidental. Do you guys even know where I found her? A short, barking laugh followed. She grew up in foster care. The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. The ripple was immediate. Several conversations faltered. A woman in a lavender hat paused mid-sip. One of Carter's college friends gave an awkward chuckle, the kind people make when they're not sure whether something is a joke. Someone set a fork down too hard. The metallic clink seemed deafening in the sudden hush. Amara felt the air leave her lungs. She turned slowly. Carter was leaning back in his chair, one arm draped over the back of the seat beside him, grinning at the small knot of men around him. His groomsmen, 2 cousins, an old roommate. He looked proud of the line, pleased with himself, as though he had just told a story about finding a rare vintage watch at a flea market, instead of casually exposing the single most painful chapter of her life to 35 near strangers. Her chest tightened so violently she thought for a second she might faint. Old images flashed behind her eyes. Thin mattress on the top bunk, the smell of institutional bleach, the way caseworkers always spoke about her in third person, even when she was sitting right there, the hollow ache every Christmas. When other children went home for the holidays and she stayed, she had spent years building armor around those memories. Layer after layer of quiet dignity, polite deflections, careful boundaries. She had told herself and Carter that she was not ashamed, that the past was the past. But hearing it flung out like that, like cheap gossip, like a punchline, cracked something deep inside the armor. She took one step toward him, then another. The room seemed to shrink. Sound became muffled. All she could hear clearly was her own heartbeat slamming against her ribs. Carter finally noticed her movement. His grin faltered for half a second, just long enough for her to see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew exactly what he had done. And then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth lifted again. A smirk, small, hidden, but there. He turned back to his friends and shrugged, as though to say, "What's the big deal?" Amara stopped 3 feet from the table. Everyone was watching now. Vivian Stone's eyebrows had risen halfway to her hairline. George Stone, Carter's father, shifted uncomfortably and looked at his watch. Chloe Davis, Amara's oldest friend from the group, home, stood frozen near the dessert table, her hand covering her mouth. Amara opened her mouth, closed it. The words she wanted to say felt too big, too raw. Instead, she whispered, so quietly only Carter could possibly hear. "Why?" He blinked. The smirk vanished. "Amara, come on," he said under his breath, glancing around at the suddenly silent audience. It was just a joke. Lighten up. A joke. The word hit her harder than the original comment. She felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who already looked at her. Like she was an interesting charity. case Carter had decided to marry. She straightened her spine, forced her voice steady. You don't get to decide what's funny about my life. Then she turned, slow, deliberate, and walked toward the hallway that led to the small bride's preparation room. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply removed herself from the scene before the humiliation could finish, swallowing her whole. Behind her, conversation restarted in fragments. Awkward laughs. Someone saying, well, anyway. Someone else murmuring, that was, wow. Chloe slipped out after her. In the narrow preparation room, Amara pressed both palms against the cool wall and tried to remember how to breathe properly. Chloe closed the door softly. Girl. Amara shook her head. Don't, please. Chloe crossed the small space anyway and wrapped both arms around her from behind. Amara let her head drop forward until her forehead rested against the paint. I thought he understood, she whispered. I really thought he got it. Chloe didn't try to sugarcoat it. He's an idiot sometimes. You know that. Amara gave a broken little laugh. Yeah, I know. They stood like that for almost 2 minutes, silent, breathing together, until the City Hall official knocked gently. Miss Jenkins, Mr. Stone, we're ready for you whenever you are. Amara straightened, wiped carefully under her eyes, checked her reflection in the small mirror beside the door. The woman looking back at her still looked beautiful, still looked composed. Only the slight redness around her lashes betrayed anything. She took one last deep breath. Let's get married, she said quietly. Chloe searched her face. You sure? No, Amara answered honestly. But I'm doing it anyway. She opened the door. The hallway was empty except for the official, who offered a kind practice smile. This way, please. Amara walked back toward the ceremony, room with her head high and her hands steady at her sides. When she re-entered the reception space, every eye turned to her again. Carter was already standing near the double doors that led into the actual marriage chamber. He looked pale, guilty, desperate to pretend the last 4 minutes hadn't happened. He stepped toward her, reaching for her hand. She let him take it, but her fingers stayed limp. He leaned close and whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I was just showing off. Stupid, I'm sorry. Amara looked straight ahead. We'll talk later, she said. Her voice was calm, final. Then she lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward into the next chapter of a day that had already gone irreversibly wrong. Outside, far down the long driveway, a low, expensive engine note began to grow louder. No one inside noticed it yet, but something was coming, something that would change the temperature of the entire room in the next few minutes, and neither Carter nor Amara, nor Vivian Stone, watching from the corner with narrowed eyes, had any idea what was about to arrive. The double doors to the ceremony chamber swung open with a soft, ceremonial creak. Golden afternoon light poured through the tall windows, catching on the polished wooden floor and the rows of white folding chairs. A string quartet, hired at Vivian's insistence, began the familiar opening bars of Pachelbel's canon, in D. The guests rose in a quiet rustle of silk and linen. Amara walked forward on Carter's arm. Her steps were measured, deliberate. She kept her eyes fixed on the justice of the peace waiting at the small podium ahead, an older woman, in a navy suit, silver hair pinned neatly, face kind but professionally neutral. She did not look at Carter. His hand rested lightly on hers, but she felt none of the usual warmth. His fingers were tense, almost pleading. Every few seconds, she sensed him glancing sideways at her profile, searching for forgiveness she wasn't ready to give. The guests watched in near silence. The earlier incident hung in the room like smoke after a fire, impossible to ignore, impossible to clear. Vivian Stone stood in the front row beside George. Her posture was perfect, chin lifted, lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Not at her son. At the bride, as though Amara's visible hurt was somehow an overreaction, an inconvenience to the otherwise flawless day. Chloe sat in the second row, eyes glassy, hands clenched in her lap. Miss Helen Vance, Amara's former group home caregiver, dabbed at her cheeks with a lace handkerchief. She had always told Amara she was stronger than any wound life could give her. Right now, Amara wasn't sure she believed it. They reached the front. The justice smiled gently. Dearly beloved, the words flowed over Amara like water over stone. She heard them, repeated the responses when prompted, slipped the plain gold band onto Carter's finger when asked. Her own hand shook only once, when he slid the matching ring onto her finger and whispered, so low no one else could hear, I love you. I swear I'll make this right. She met his eyes then, For the first time since the comment, what she saw there was genuine regret and fear. Fear that he had broken something irreparable on the very day he was supposed to build forever. She gave him nothing back. No smile, no softening, just a small, almost imperceptible nod. The justice pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss the bride." Carter leaned in. His lips brushed hers, careful, tentative, almost chaste. The room applauded politely. A few whoops from his groomsmen. Rice and rose petals rained down as they turned to walk back down the aisle. Amara kept her gaze forward. She would not cry here. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her crack. Outside the chamber, in the wide reception hall again, the mood was fractured. Guests milled about, uncertain whether to offer congratulations or pretend. The earlier tension had never existed. Someone started soft music again. Champagne was passed around, but the laughter felt forced. Carter tried to pull Amara toward the photo area near the tall windows. "Pictures first?" he asked quietly. "Then we can talk, please." She nodded once, mechanical. The photographer, a cheerful young woman with a heavy camera strap, positioned them in front of the City Hall steps. Carter wrapped an arm around her waist. She allowed it. The camera clicked. "Big smiles, lovebirds." Amara curved her lips. It looked convincing in the viewfinder. Inside it felt like glass. They were posing for the third setup when the sound reached them. A low velvet rumble, expensive, purposeful, heads turned. Through the open double doors at the far end of the courtyard, a long white limousine glided into view. Not a rented stretch. Not the standard wedding party Lincoln everyone expected. This was something else. Glossy, custom length, windows tinted midnight black. Chrome so bright it threw shards of sunlight across the stone pavers. Two men in dark suits stepped out first. Not chauffeurs exactly, more like discreet security. They scanned the area with practiced efficiency before one opened the rear door. A collective murmur rose from the guests clustered near the entrance. "Who ordered that?" Someone whispered. "Not us," Vivian said sharply to George. "We booked the black Escalade service. Standard package." Carter frowned. "I didn't—" Amara felt her stomach twist in a new way. The driver, tall, immaculate gray suit, silver hair at the temples, approached the City Hall official who had stepped outside to investigate. They spoke briefly. The official nodded, then re-entered the building. Moments later, he reappeared, escorting a man in his late 40s. The stranger was lean, well-groomed, charcoal suit tailored to perfection, wire-rimmed glasses, calm gray eyes that seemed to catalog every face in the room without hurry. He walked straight toward Amara. The crowd parted instinctively. "Miss Jenkins?" he asked, voice low and courteous. A faint British accent, or rather, "Mrs. Stone, I suppose, as of 10 minutes ago." Amara blinked. "Yes." He inclined his head. "Elliot Reed, I represent Claire Vernon." The name meant nothing to her. "I've been instructed to offer my employers congratulations on your marriage," he continued, "and to provide appropriate transportation to your reception venue. A wedding day should be memorable for the right reasons." He gestured toward the limousine. Carter stepped forward, shoulders squared. "We already have cars arranged." Elliot's smile was polite, unruffled. "Of course. The additional vehicle is merely a gesture. The choice is entirely yours." But Miss Vernon was quite specific. She wished the bride to arrive in comfort and style. He turned his attention fully to Amara. Carter tried to pull Amara toward the photo area near the tall windows. "Pictures first?" he asked quietly. "Then we can talk, please." She nodded once, mechanical. The photographer, a cheerful young woman with a heavy camera strap, positioned them in front of the City Hall steps. Carter wrapped an arm around her waist. She allowed it. The camera clicked. "Big smiles, lovebirds." Amara curved her lips. It looked convincing in the viewfinder. Inside it felt like glass. They were posing for the third setup when the sound reached them. A low velvet rumble, expensive, purposeful, heads turned. Through the open double doors at the far end of the courtyard, a long white limousine glided into view. Not a rented stretch, not the standard wedding party Lincoln everyone expected. This was something else. Glossy, custom length, windows tinted midnight black, chrome so bright it threw shards of sunlight across the stone pavers. Two men in dark suits stepped out first. Not chauffeurs exactly. More like discreet security, they scanned the area with practiced efficiency before one opened the rear door. A collective murmur rose from the guests clustered near the entrance. "Who ordered that?" someone whispered. "Not us," Vivian said sharply to George. "We booked the black Escalade service. Standard package." Carter frowned. "I didn't—" Amara felt her stomach twist in a new way. The driver, tall, immaculate gray suit, silver hair at the temples, approached the city hall official who had stepped outside to investigate. They spoke briefly. The official nodded, then re-entered the building. Moments later, he reappeared, escorting a man in his late 40s. The stranger was lean, well-groomed, charcoal suit tailored to perfection, wire-rimmed glasses, calm gray eyes that seemed to catalog every face in the room without hurry. He walked straight toward Amara. The crowd parted instinctively. "Miss Jenkins?" he asked, voice low and courteous, a faint British accent. Or rather, "Mrs. Stone, I suppose, as of 10 minutes ago." Amara blinked. "Yes." He inclined his head. "Elliot Reed, I represent Claire Vernon." The name meant nothing to her. "I've been instructed to offer my employers congratulations on your marriage," he continued, "and to provide appropriate transportation to your reception venue. A wedding day should be memorable for the right reasons." He gestured toward the limousine. Carter stepped forward, shoulders squared. "We already have cars arranged." Elliot's smile was polite, unruffled. "Of course. The additional vehicle is merely a gesture. The choice is entirely yours." But Miss Vernon was quite specific. She wished the bride to arrive in comfort and style. He turned his attention fully to Amara. "She has followed your journey for some time," he said gently. "From afar. She could not attend in person today, but she wanted to ensure this moment felt elevated." Amara's mouth went dry. "Claire Vernon," she repeated slowly. "I don't know anyone by that name." Elliot nodded as though he had expected the question. "That will change, I suspect, when she is ready. For today, please accept this small token. The car is yours to use as you see fit. Champagne is chilled inside. There is also a privacy partition should you wish it." He handed her a simple cream card, no logo, only embossed black lettering. "Elliot Reed, personal representative, Claire Vernon." A private mobile number beneath. "If you have any questions at all," he said, "I am at your disposal." Then he stepped back, giving them space. The courtyard had gone almost completely silent. Every guest was staring. At the car, at Amara, at Carter's suddenly uncertain face. Vivian's voice cut through first. "How thoughtful." The word dripped acid. "And entirely unexpected." George cleared his throat. "Looks like quite the surprise, son." Carter forced a laugh. It sounded hollow. "Yeah, big surprise." Amara looked from the gleaming car to Elliot Reed's calm face, then to Carter. Something shifted inside her, small but unmistakable. The humiliation Carter had inflicted minutes earlier still burned. But this, whatever this was, felt like a counterweight. Not revenge. Balance. She lifted her chin. "Thank you, Mr. Reed," she said clearly. "Please tell Miss Vernon I'm grateful." And, surprised, Elliot inclined his head again. "I will convey that precisely." He returned to the limousine. Amara turned to Carter. The photographer hovered uncertainly. "Should we keep shooting?" Amara glanced at the white car sparkling in the sun. "Yes," she said. "But let's take some in front of that." Carter hesitated. Then he nodded. They posed again, this time with the limousine as backdrop. The pictures were stunning. Hollywood perfect. Amara, in white against white chrome. Carter in black tuxedo beside her, the contrast sharp. The symbolism impossible to miss. Guests crowded closer, phones out, snapping their own shots. "Look at that thing," Chloe whispered to Miss Helen. "Whoever Claire Vernon is, she's not playing." Miss Helen smiled softly. Maybe the universe decided Amara deserved one perfect moment today. Amara heard none of it. She was looking at her own reflection in the tinted window. For the first time since Carter's comment, she didn't look broken. She looked curious, and maybe, just maybe, a little powerful. The reception convoy formed 20 minutes later. The original black sedans trailed behind like obedient shadows. The white limousine led. Amara sat in the back, Carter beside her. He poured 2 glasses of chilled Veuve Clicquot from the built-in cooler. "To us," he said quietly. She accepted the flute. "To surviving the day," she answered. He winced. "Amara—" "Not now," she said. "Later, when we're alone." "Really alone?" He nodded. The partition was up. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. The city slid past the tinted windows in a dreamy blur. Amara leaned her head back against the butter-soft leather. She didn't know who Claire Vernon was. She didn't know why this woman had chosen today, of all days, to step invisibly into her life. But one thing was already certain. Whatever came next, the story Carter had tried to tell about her in that bright reception. Room was no longer the only story being told. And for the first time in years, Amara felt the beginning of something she hadn't dared hope for. A different ending. The limousine glided through the city like a quiet promise, streetlights streaking across the tinted windows in golden ribbons. Inside, the partition stayed up. The jazz had softened to almost nothing. Amara sat with her veil carefully folded across her lap, the champagne flute still half full in her hand. Carter kept glancing at her, then away, then back again, the way a child checks a wound to see if it still hurts. They hadn't spoken since the toast. Finally, he broke the silence. "I keep replaying it," he said quietly. "What I said back there. I thought it would, I don't know, make me sound confident, like I was owning it, like it didn't matter." Amara stared at the passing buildings. "It mattered to me." "I know." His voice cracked on the second word. "I saw your face. I'll never unsee it." She turned to look at him then. Really look. His eyes were red-rimmed. The confident, easygoing groom from the photos was gone. In his place sat a man who looked terrified of losing the one thing he claimed mattered most. "I'm not asking you to forget where I came from," she said. "I'm asking you to stop using it like a punchline, especially not in front of people who already think I don't belong." Carter swallowed hard. "I won't, ever again, I swear." She studied him for a long moment. "I want to believe you." "Then let me prove it," he said. "Starting tonight." "Starting right now." The car slowed as they approached the reception hall, a low, elegant building beside a small lake. Fairy lights strung between the trees, music already drifting out through the open doors. Elliot Reed was waiting at the curb. He opened the door himself. "Mrs. Stone," he said with that same calm courtesy, "the venue staff has been informed. Your things are already inside. Whenever you're ready." Amara stepped out first. The night air smelled of water and late spring flowers. Guests were arriving in their own cars, clustering near the entrance, still buzzing about the limousine that had led the procession like royalty. Carter followed. He offered his arm. This time she took it, not because everything was forgiven, but because they had a performance to finish. The grand entrance was announced with fanfare. The master of ceremonies, a tall man in a burgundy suit, boomed into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever, Mr. and Mrs. Carter Stone." Applause erupted. They walked into cheers and flashing phones. Amara forced the brightest smile she could manage. Carter matched it, though his grip on her hand was almost too tight. They took their seats at the head table. Toasts began almost immediately. Vivian rose first, elegant, composed, every inch the society matron. "Carter and Amara," she began, voice carrying effortlessly. "Marriage is a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and, above all, family legacy. We are so pleased to welcome you both into ours." The subtext was unmistakable. Amara kept her face serene. She had heard variations of this speech for months. Chloe and Naomi followed, their words warmer, funnier, rooted in real history. They spoke of Amara's kindness in the group home, her stubborn hope, the way she mothered the younger kids, even when she was barely more than a child herself. Miss Helen's toast was the shortest and the most devastating in its gentleness. "Amara always had the biggest heart in any room," she said simply. "I only ever wanted one thing for her, a real home. Tonight, I pray she's found it." Carter bowed his head during that one. Amara felt tears threaten again, different tears this time, grateful ones. The first dance came next. The lights dimmed. A slow, aching ballad filled the room. Carter led her to the center of the floor. As soon as they began to move, he leaned in close. "I was wrong," he whispered against her ear, "about a lot of things. Not just today. I've been scared. Scared my friends would think less of me. Scared my mom would never really accept you. Scared that if I didn't make jokes about it, people would see how much better you are than me." Amara's breath caught. He kept going, voice barely audible over the music. "But the only person whose opinion should have mattered was yours. And I hurt you. On our wedding day, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel small again. If you'll let me." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "You don't get to decide how small I feel," she said softly, "but you can decide whether you stand beside me when the world tries to make me feel that way." "I will," he promised, "always." The song ended. The room applauded. They returned to their table. Later, after cake, after bouquet toss, after too many glasses of champagne, Amara slipped away to find Elliot Reed. He was sitting alone at a small side table, nursing a club soda. "Mr. Reed?" she said quietly. He stood at once. "Mrs. Stone, how may I help? I need to know, who is Claire Vernon, really?" He hesitated, only for a second. "She was your mother's closest friend," he said. "Tanya Jackson. They grew up together. When Tanya became pregnant, Claire was overseas for work. By the time she returned, it was too late. Tanya had passed. You were already in care. Amara felt the floor tilt. My mother died? Elliot nodded gently. Complications from untreated illness. She was 23. Amara pressed a hand to her chest. And Claire tried to find me? She did. Multiple times. The system made it nearly impossible. When she finally located you, years later, she chose not to disrupt your life uninvited. Until today. Amara looked across the room at Carter laughing with his friends, a little drunk, a little looser, but watching her every few seconds like she might disappear. Why today? She asked. Because today you chose your future, Elliot said simply. And she wanted you to know, even if only symbolically, that you were never truly alone. Amara closed her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, for delivering that message. Elliot inclined his head. She hopes, one day, to deliver it herself. When you're ready, Amara nodded. I'll think about it. The night wound down. Guests left in 2s and 3s. Gifts were loaded into the limousine's trunk. Carter and Amara said their final goodbyes. In the back seat again, this time headed to their new apartment, silence returned. But it was different now, softer. Carter reached for her hand. She let him take it. I love you, he said. I know, she answered. And I love you. But love isn't enough by itself. We have work to do. He squeezed her fingers. Then we'll do it together. The car stopped outside their building. Elliot helped carry the gifts upstairs. When everything was inside, he bowed once more. Congratulations again, he said. And should you ever need anything... He left the sentence unfinished. Amara closed the door behind him. She and Carter stood in the hallway, surrounded by boxes and bouquets. He looked at her, uncertain, hopeful. She stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest. Hold me, she said. He did. They stayed like that a long time. Weeks turned into months. Amara met Claire Vernon in a quiet cafe downtown on a Tuesday afternoon. The older woman had dark curls and kind, tired eyes. She carried a small envelope of letters, Tanya's handwriting. Fragile and full of regret, they cried together. They laughed about the girl Tanya used to be. They promised nothing permanent, only the possibility of more conversations. Amara took the job Claire offered. After a real interview, after proving herself, the salary changed their lives quietly but dramatically. Carter started speaking seriously about his own business dreams. Vivian never fully warmed, but she stopped making certain comments when Carter began shutting them down. Calmly, firmly, every time. One evening, almost 8 months after the wedding, Carter came home with mortgage papers and a 3-bedroom listing printout. I think we're ready, he said. Amara looked at the pictures. Sunlight through big windows. A yard, space for a child someday. She smiled, real this time, unguarded. Yeah, she said. I think we are. They signed the papers together. Later that night, lying in bed with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Amara whispered, Do you remember the limousine? Carter chuckled softly. How could I forget? It stole my thunder. She turned toward him. It gave me something better than thunder, she said. It gave me proof. Of what? That my story was never just loss. He kissed her forehead. And now it's ours. She closed her eyes. Ours, she echoed. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, 2 people who had hurt each other, and chosen each other anyway, finally began to build something unbreakable. Not perfect, not painless, but real. And that, Amara thought as sleep finally came, was more than enough.